Hey guys, this design is going to be a real simple, basically, you could almost call it a vector illustration, but we're just going to talk a little bit about the things we can do in Photoshop that we may not be able to do in Illustrator as we kind of still work within sort of these photo compositing or photo creations, as it were. So in this case, I've done this little illustration, this very simplified, kind of stylized illustration of this girl here by virtue of doing a couple of things. The first thing I did was make some lines using my pen tool, and then I filled it up, and then I added a couple different textures, and we'll talk about how we do all those things. But first, I just wanted to kind of let you guys know that I use this little color palette here that I found off of color.adobe.com. This is on the main page. If you want to explore that, to think about this, the idea with the stylized portrait is that we kind of base this around having a pretty simple palette. We don't have a limited number of colors. Obviously, if you were to sort of sample the colors inside this, you'd probably come up with, I don't know, millions of colors, individual pixels and stuff. I want to say JPEGs support about 6 million different specific hues, given that sort of combination of all the different hexadecimal codes and stuff. But the idea, once again, is that we are going to just kind of basically, I'm going to show you some real simple techniques, and then we'll come back to how we, I'll come back to this little drawing here. So let me just start us off. I'll start us off by making a duplicate of this, just to kind of have a method of editing this without having to put any smart objects on there. So I'm just going to go to image adjustments, and I'm just going to bring up the contrast a good deal, and that's going to give me at least some better idea on where to put my lines. So let me just pull the contrast up until I get some really, kind of sort of harsh lines between different things. As you can see here, in this particular instance, you can, whatever you want. You may want to, so I originally started off with this drawing here. Now this picture here. This picture here, I mean, obviously there's a lot of like clear lines. You can make some neat things out of it. But the thing that I was sort of tripping up over was her chin. Like, she's got this sort of, line here for her neck and this line here for her chin. I wasn't quite sure how to approach that. So you may want to think about a image that allows you to kind of find some pretty stark lines here or there. And I'm just going to run through the basic approach that I did this. So the first thing I did was make a new layer and get my brush tool selected. And I went ahead, now this picture is about 1920 across, so my rough outlines here, I made those about 15 pixels wide. So if you make your brush about 15 pixels, you can kind of see this is the sort of brush we're looking at here. Let me get a hard round brush, as it were. So we're going to make sure that we choose just a hard round brush, 0% softness, right? And it's about 15 pixels wide. So that's what we're looking for. Now, before we go any further, let's go ahead and find our brush settings here. And so under brush settings, if you don't see this, you can go to Window, Brush Settings, F5 on the keyboard apparently, and click on Shape Dynamics and have the control be set to pen pressure. Now in this case we don't actually have a pen in which to exert that pressure, but we do have the ability to simulate that pressure. And we're going to bring the minimum diameter up to about 30%. 30-40% is good. If it goes down to 0%, that's going to make it kind of harsh, especially when we have these short lines. But 30%, and that ratio is going to maintain throughout most of the drawing here. So I'm just going to get my pen tool here. I'm using my touchpad, so it's going to be kind of awkward. But you want to make as close an approximation to the curves of, like, say, for instance, the outside of the face. Remember, you can hold down Control to move the point once you've established it. You can hold down Alt to sort of alter the trajectory of the next little path here. And we're going to make some fairly short lines to begin with. So, for instance, this case right here, I'm going to, I think here... Okay, I'm going to stop it right about there where her chin ends. And I'm going to make sure I'm on this new layer. I'll just call this layer Lines for now. And I don't want to reduce the opacity of my drawing so I can see, say for instance, black better. So I'm going to make this a pretty bright color. I'm going to make it bright pink, just so I can see it real well. When I right-click on it and I click on Stroke Path, and I make sure that my tool is set to Brush, and then I'm simulating the pressure here. So I press OK, and then that gets drawn there, and I'm going to delete this path now. And as you can see, we have this line drawn here. You may like the thickness of the line. You may not like the thickness of the line, but the point is that you want it to taper off as if it's doing a little pen stroke. I'll get a little closer here just so I can make sure that I'm going to make my next stroke right on top of that last stroke I made. So I'll just click here and I'll just kind of follow along the lines of her face. I'm going to ignore these wispy hairs here, and I'll just come up to maybe right about there, and I might end it right about there. And that'll be the next one I do. I'm going to Alt drag this up a little bit, and I'll just stroke this and press OK, and then delete. And we'll continue on. I'll just continue on with this, and hopefully we can come up with a good outline for the face. Right click, stroke path, center, delete, delete. Okay. All right, so that's the sort of outline of the face. Now there's a couple bits here or there that I'm not sure I really like. This little thing point pops out here. I might get my eraser, just sort of real easily kind of like brush that aside. I have my eraser once again set to hard and round. It's 0% or 100% hardness, no softness at all. Right. Okay, so with that done, I'll real quick do some outlines of the face itself. I'll just zoom out slightly here, get my pen tool, and I'll just get the hair kind of roughed out here. Just one. And in this case, I'm going to Alt drag this up here, and I'm going to Alt click on this guy just to get rid of that little anchor point, and I'll just drag this out here, and I'll once again make a sort of a stylized version of her hair, just kind of coming right up to the edge of her face, like so. And then I'll press stroke path, right click, or press enter, and we've got that. And I'll just do the same thing here. I'll make a part for her hair, and I'll have that go straight down, and get my Alt key here and sort of drag this out. Okay. There we go. And I'll just stroke path there. Oops. And well, goodness. And we'll just do the outside here, and then I'll show you kind of my plan for the other side. So I'll make a fairly roughed out image here. I'll show you the plan for doing the details of the face here. So the idea, once again, is that you want to make sure that the narrow end of the line kind of follows along with sort of narrow parts of the face. So for instance, this little curve here of her hair, I want this to join up together. I want this to be sort of a slender kind of area. I'm going to make sure that that doesn't have a real thick kind of vertex there, because I want to be able to, you know, color in the lines there. So I don't want it to be super chunked out like that. So I'll just right click on this, and I'll just stroke this right there. And we can fix that later. Okay, so just for that, I'm going to make a new layer here. I'm going to call it Face Lines. And I'm going to change the color of my brush tool. So I'm going to hit B on the keyboard to get my brush up. I'm just going to get my brush to be maybe like a bright blue, like this, and just so it'll contrast with the pink. And I'm going to make the lines of the face a different color, and I'm also going to make them a good deal more fine. So in this case, I'm going to get my brush tool, and I'm going to reduce the size of my pen to about half. I'm going to say 7 pixels instead of 15. And so now when I draw the lines of the face, for instance, the lines, I don't mind if I overlap here because they're on a different layer. I'm going to right click, stroke path, press enter, and then I'll just delete that. And I'll just right click, here we go again. Okay, and so notice there, I let that to be there. And so I can just go back here and I can just erase the stuff that sort of overlaps here. And even though they still overlap on the blue and the pink, I want that so that it'll form a solid mass. And then I'll just do this one more time over here. And this doesn't really meet up, so I'll get my brush tool and sort of shrink that down some. And then, right, and I'll shrink it back up to 7. And we'll just make, I'm just going to real quick rough out the lines of the face, just going to show you, and I'll move on to the next little set there. Okay, right click. These lines right there. And then, right, okay. So I'm just going to kind of skip ahead here. But the point is, once you get your strokes all finalized, in this case, I would add stuff to her shoulders and her dress that she's wearing, and I would probably leave out the necklace, and I would probably leave out the eyelashes, but I would probably just make a little line for her, for the space on hers. Once you have all that, you can just sort of merge these down. Merge down, right click on these, or merge layers, and then from there, right click on them and find your blending options. And then from there, just do a color overlay so they're all the same color. And then from there, right click on this and convert this to a smart object. And so at this point, they're finalized with like being this sort of black stroke here. And so you have that outline. And so again, by virtue of varying out the sort of width of the stroke as the stroke is sort of applied, and varying out the width of the stroke for different areas, different finer features, you can create an interesting little effect. Okay, so with that done, I'm just going to pull these out, and I'll show you the lines that I made here. I'll get this out. In fact, I'll make this white for now. So what I did here is I have my lines, and I applied a Liquify Effect just to adjust things. You can do that as well if you feel so inclined. But in this case, I'll just make a new color layer here. It's a solid color, and I'll just make it white for now, just to simplify things. And with that, you've got a couple options with your colors. You can click on your colors here, and you can hold down the function key on your keyboard, and there should be a little six button row above the cursor keys. You might see it says PRNT SCR SEN print screen. For me, it's like pressing F7, and I would come back over here to my just Control V, and that should give us the nope. I gotta make a new layer here. Control V. Anyways, all right. Well, maybe let's try this. All right, there we go. Okay, cool. And I can just move this off to the side. Maybe shrink it down some. You can't move it off the canvas. Unlike Illustrator, you can't move things off the canvas. So that's hanging out there, and then I can just have that to be sampled later on. Okay, so with that done, what I want to do is this. I want to make a new layer. I'll call it Fill. Let me just go ahead and delete this layer down here, and this layer as well. Why not this layer too? How about that one too as well? Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to make a new layer below my face lines. I'll call it Fill. And the way we go about this is we simply take our magic wand tool here. So find your magic wand, just magic wand, and you just click inside whatever area you want to color. And then you go back down to your fill, and then before you do anything, go to Select, Modify, Expand, and then expand it by, in this case, I chose 3 pixels. You may want to do more or less depending on what you got, and then you just sample whatever color you want to fill it up with. So in this case, this dark blue, maybe this slightly less dark blue, and then I'll just fill it up. And then so from there, it's just a matter of going back and forth. W on the keyboard, select, modify, expand, and then selecting whatever color you want to do. In this case, the lighter blue here, and I'll just, same layer, G, and then on the keyboard, back up to it, W on the keyboard, clicking down here, going up to select, modify, and expand. And there is a way of assigning this to a hotkey. We won't go into that now, like the hotkey, like keyboard shortcut and stuff. And then I on the keyboard, darker blue, G, fill it up, right? And then so on and so forth, right? And so in this case, what's cool is that you can hold down Shift while you select, hold down Shift and select, for instance, all the skin tones here. Select, modify, expand. Right. Okay. The reason why we're doing that is to avoid a little gap of white between the lines and the color. And once again, I'll just get my skin tone, which in this case will be this pink color, and it was blocked off by the fill. But notice here, there's a couple of random spots where the color does not quite land. You don't want to leave those in there, so just get your brush tool, hit I on the keyboard to sample, or in this case, I'll sample it here, and you can just fill those in like so with your brush tool. So same here, just I on the keyboard, sample, hello, not SI, and then B, and just sort of fill that in like so. Right. I on the keyboard, D, All right. And you'll just continue doing that until you get all of your stuff filled up. Now, what I did was I ended up adding a color behind it. I decided to go with orange. That's also going to allow you to see what you don't have copied. And the final thing that I ended up with was this. This is what I ended up with at the very end. The way I did this little shadow was just by simply going to my lines and then selecting inside the face just to kind of constrain it, and then going on top of the fill and making a new layer, and then just taking my path tool and just creating a little path around the face just to add the shadow here. And then from there, let me just alt click this. From there, kind of coming around like so, and just pressing fill path, and then choosing color. And I just sampled the face, and then under brightness, the B for brightness, I just pulled it down some, just so I could have that there. And then press OK. Then it fills it up with this little color here. And then from there, you can clean that up. For instance, if I want to put this here, I can take my brush tool and just sort of brush this in, just to, oops, I on the keyboard, B, just to brush that in, just to kind of get that all finalized here. And finally, what I did was, once I get all that done, I duplicated this layer. So here's the final version that I made here. Where once I got done with my filling and using my lines, I made a new layer that I then adjusted the brightness of. Let me just show you precisely what I did here with my curves. I made it very, very bright. And then from there, I just added a layer mask. So let me just kind of put this layer mask on here. And I took this brush that you can find under your splatter brush effects. It should be under Kyle's special effects brush, or in this case, it's called the, I want to say it's called the screen tones. And with screen tones, what you get are these little dots in the, in the Lichtenstein, Roy Lichtenstein kind of like bent. If you're not sure who that is, you can look him up. But I'll just fill this up with black first, and then I'll just take my screen tones brush, and I'll hit B on the keyboard with white, and I'll just choose, once again, call screen tones, and make it a bit bigger. And I'll just sort of paint in this sort of texture here. In this case, I'm not sure I like this. What I'll do is I'll just, once again, go over here to my brush settings, and as far as the pattern goes, let's see, is it texture? I want to say I'll bring the scale up a good deal. So it's, yeah, right, bring the scale up so it's a little more widely spaced. And I'll just pull this up as well. So now I can just sort of paint this in. And this little duotone, this little, not duotone, but this sort of screen tone effect, which was what the old comic books were made when they were printed on the poly paper. They would be printed off with these little dots of ink that were sort of, when they were next to one another, they would form the various colors and stuff. So with that done, I'll pull the fill down a good deal, say like 20%. And then what I'll do is I'll go over here to my lines and just get my my magic wand and select all these areas that I don't want those things to show up. Go back over here and then Control and backspace, which should be filling it up with black, which was the background color there. Okay, so that's basically it. Find a photo. Trace out the lines, varying up your width, varying up the thickness of the lines that you use for various parts of the face. And then once you're done with all that, you can fill it up with a limited palette, a limited number of colors. And then once you're done with that, let's see if we can't apply a background color to it, and then apply a little texture on the top of it just to give it a little bit of flair. If at the end of the day you want to maybe put, like, say for instance, like a texture on top of that, like one of those grunge filters that we used from before, or whatever, just save that as a JPEG, submit that. Very cool. Can't wait to see you guys produce. See you in class.